Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the Campus Bubble webinar series, Supporting First Generation Students. Access doesn't end with acceptance. My name is Spencer Barkoff. I'm the CEO here at Campus Bubble. I'd like to introduce Nika Shaletska. Nika is our senior campus consultant here at Campus Bubble. She received her master's in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania, and before coming to Campus Bubble, worked at numerous higher education institutions. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Nika.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. I'm really excited to share some of the research that we have for you today. So want to really be mindful of your time. We're planning on about 20 minutes with a little bit of extra time for Q&A at the end. And after the webinar, we'll follow up with via email with a list of additional resources and a link to the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please send us a message through your GoToWebinar panel under questions, and we'll try to help you out as best as we can. Throughout the webinar, we'll also have a few polls and questions for you to answer to get a sense of the situation on your campus, and for you to share your experiences with colleagues around the country and to build our collective knowledge. So without further ado, we'll jump right into our first poll. And sorry, we're having just a moment here. Sorry, we had just a bit of technical difficulties ourselves. So the first question, approximately what percentage of your admitted students are the first in their families to go to college? So you should see the questions here up on your screen, and just a rough estimate is great. We'll give you a moment or two to respond, and then we'll share the results with you in just a moment. All right, and so the responses, it looks like most of you between 25 and 50%. And again, we apologize for our little bit of technical difficulty on our end. So when we're thinking about MELT, we've often thought about MELT in the traditional sense, in that students are changing their minds during the summer. Perhaps they got off the wait list at one college or decided to attend a college that was closer to home. But the situation for students from underrepresented groups is very different, and primarily around the percentage of students who melt. So researchers Lindsay Page of the University of Pittsburgh and Ben Castleman from the University of Virginia have found that anywhere from 10 to 40% of low-income and or first-generation students melt over the summer. And not only that, but unlike in the traditional sense, a lot of these students end up not going to college anywhere. So some researchers have referred to this as a summer flood. And while we often have thought about access in terms of colleges adjusting their admissions procedures and criteria and bringing in more first-generation students, the reality is very different for them. And they continue making this decision about whether they'll even enroll at a college throughout the summer. So it's a challenge, but also a huge opportunity for us in higher education to make an impact and increase college going amongst first-generation students. So our second poll, we're going to get this one right this time. Of your admitted first-generation students who have demonstrated an intent to enroll, approximately what percentage melt during the summer? So I have a few options there. And again, we'll give you just a moment to answer and share those responses in a couple moments. Looks like most of you are between 10 to 25%, and then another third between 25 and 50%. So pretty big numbers, again, demonstrating there's really an opportunity for us to make a difference. Some of the challenges that first-generation students faced, and I won't go into too much detail because as admissions professionals, I know you're all very well aware of these challenges, primarily around, of course, financial aid and navigating the associated paperwork that has to be completed in order to get those financial aid packages. And there are some companies that are doing really great work making this process easier, particularly around verification. In addition, just kind of the maze of pre-matriculation tasks that students have to complete throughout the summer. And for many first-generation students, they're balancing family and work demands all throughout the summer, bringing in income through part-time jobs or even full-time jobs, and while at the same time having to complete all of these tasks. So not necessarily, the challenges aren't necessarily very different from those that all admitted students face, but what is different is that these students have a lack of support. Some of them might have access to college, to a local organization that might help them with college access, a summer bridge program, or TRIO programs, but there are a lot of students who fall through the cracks, and that's primarily exacerbated by the loose handoff, which is what some researchers are calling it, between secondary and post-secondary institutions. So the admissions counselors, the high school counselors are 10-month employees. They're not working during the summer, but students aren't yet on campus and maybe just don't know where to go for help. And that's really the root of the problem, especially towards the end of the summer. And that's when a lot of times these students drop off. There's some task they can't complete, and because of that, they end up not going to college at all. And some of the challenges, as you can see on the screen, are really around communicating with all of our students. Some of the work that we do here at Campus Bubble, our work really focuses on helping colleges communicate with students the way that today's students communicate and meeting students where they are. And there's a real disconnect between the way that we communicate with students and the way that students like to communicate and naturally communicate. These digital natives they're just doing things differently. We send a lot of emails, as you can see at the top of the screen, but for students, that's not really the way to go. Most of those emails, while helpful and well-intentioned, go unanswered. Professor Ray Junko at Iowa State University has found that students spend as little as 6 minutes a day on email. You can check out that New York Times article from 2013 to learn a little bit more about it. And Professor Junko is great. He has a blog about social media use amongst college students, and really is a proponent of colleges communicating with their students via social media. In addition, a lot of great information on our college websites, but these websites can be very, very hard to navigate. Even for me when I was going back to graduate school, trying to find that piece of information, trying to get my question answered, proved to be extremely difficult. And that's also exacerbated by the fact that a lot of college websites are not optimized for mobile. So when students are trying to access this on their mobile devices and smartphones and just having a really hard time. So thinking about ways that we can communicate with students the way they communicate. Phone is not the way we've found. The phone can be scary for all of us, but also for 18, 19-year-olds. I love this quote from a student here in the Atlanta area. He's a college freshman, and might have been exaggerating a little bit here about 2 hours on the phone, but it really gives you a sense of some of the challenges these students face and everyone faces to get just one question answered. And he went on to describe trying to navigate through an automated menu, being unsure which option to choose, ending up talking to the wrong person. Finally, he was transferred to the correct person, and it went to voicemail. So a lot of challenges there, and especially for first-generation students who are working during the summer, that's a time they're bringing in income and can't maybe spend 20 or 30 minutes on the phone to have a question answered. And we're seeing that in all aspects of life right now, because companies increasingly are eliminating or maybe supplementing their support with live chat, and even some colleges have implemented live chat to better communicate with students. So this is not necessarily a poll question, but you can write in your responses through the questions section. Before we jump into some of the solutions that we looked into, what ways do you currently provide support to your admitted first generation students? So if you want to share something, we'll give you a minute or two to type to give us a response and share some of those as well. So just a couple responses, mostly around kind of challenges with giving support particularly to first generation students. So I think that's not uncommon. So going into some of the results, we're only going to focus on a few, again, to be mindful of your time, on through the three most promising, inexpensive results that are easiest to implement based on the research that we conducted. And the first one, I'm so excited about this. It's called text message nudging. And the research has really come out of, again, from Lindsay Page and Ben Castleman. They wrote a book called Summer Melt, supporting low-income students through the transition to college. It just came out last year, and it's a great read. I highly recommend it. But text message nudging is based on behavioral economics, which shows that a series of personalized touches can really have positive impacts on student outcomes. And so what this looks like is on the student side, they're getting text messages, personalized messages that appear to be coming from their college. For the counselors on the other side, it's a web-based kind of like email inbox where they can set up text message templates and add in a URL for students to link to and allow students to reply directly, but it's not going to your phone. And in their research, Page and Castleman, they initially conducted it with school districts and college access organizations, but found a 10% increase in enrollment. And the latest, so they wanted to kind of expand that research and carried that out along with Laura Owen from San Diego State, and found that college outreach may in fact be even more effective than students getting outreach from high schools or from community-based organizations. And that's an article that we'll link to after the webinar and send you that information. But the title is Stay Late or Start Early, and it came out just this year over the summer in the Economics of Education Review. And you can, I believe, find that on Science Direct. And there are several platforms that can help you accomplish these goals. The most promising one is called Signalvine, because it was actually built specifically for use with higher education institutions. And there's even more research underway right now around that platform being used by colleges with their admitted students. And I know Signalvine spoke with them last week. They work with about 10 schools through their admissions program. So it's new and innovative, yet surprisingly simple and incredibly effective. Again, you're importing student lists and information and setting up these text templates, scheduling them out, and being able to respond to students. And the initial research found got incredibly positive feedback from students. There were very few students who opted out, and most of them were incredibly appreciative and were really able to accomplish some of those tasks. Texting is also relatively low cost, anywhere from 10 cents to $1 per student per month, and that depends on the number of students and the number of texts that are being sent. But the good news about that is, unlike emails, which have a shockingly low open rate and very disappointing for those of us sending the emails, if you look online, and we'll send you a link to this information, around 98% of text messages are open. So it's an incredibly effective way to reach students. And again, if you have a chance to read this book, I really recommend it. I was so excited when I was reading this. On to some other solutions. So an area for improvement is thinking about our enrollment checklists. Almost all schools provide these for their students, but starting with a self-assessment, maybe taking a look at that information. And these are the 3 key characteristics of a good enrollment checklist. Clear deadlines. So students know exactly when certain forms are due or when they have to take placement exams by. Direct links to, for example, a form. So rather than sending a student to the financial aid office, including in that enrollment checklist a PDF of the form that they need to complete. And finally, while almost all of us do a good job at number 1 and 2, the third one is really key, letting students know a specific point of contact, someone they can reach out to if they have a problem. And that's where a lot of the enrollment checklists kind of come up short. Students don't know whom to contact other than the financial aid office, and can be, again, overwhelming and maybe doesn't really help students as much as it could. So a lot of schools now are creating these portals, even for prospective students to complete their applications. I'm sure many of you are doing this, but also for admitted students with pre-matriculation tasks. And I was able to create my own here in the Tennessee Tech Fly Zone. But these are really great because they're personalized, and that's one of the key features of effectively reaching out to first-generation students, because there's always, what is my particular situation? And that's true for anyone, so it can benefit all of your admitted students as well. And while these may be more money and time-intensive to build, they can be incredibly effective. I know when I was going back to grad school, having that available to me and knowing which financial aid forms were missing really helped me, rather than having to dig around the website or call somebody. And I think in the past these were more of a nice to have, but they're becoming, I think, musts. I also really like this this is from Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College in Asheville, North Carolina, and I really love this roadmap. Although it doesn't have deadlines or contact information, it helps students visualize the enrollment journey as a series of tasks and milestones that have to be completed. And depending on what kind of student you are, you have a different route through that process. And now, increasingly, we all communicate visually more and more. Think of the rise of Instagram and Snapchat, or your third grade teacher saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And you can easily create something like this through infographics. I really like PictoChart for creating free infographics. I think these are really effective. You can, unlike the series of long enrollment checklists, you can kind of see this at a glance and take in that information a little bit easier. Finally, admitted student blogs or first year blogs. We did this at the college where I used to work, which is not Barnard, but Barnard does this as well. And this is a great way to communicate with your admitted students. It's also it's free to set up a WordPress account and really easy to implement it. Once the IT department pulled it into the admitted students website, we were able to do a lot of the work and create the posts without any help. So we liked it, and the IT departments really liked that as well. And it really was a great way to communicate deadlines to students. I really like here on Barnard that they have kind of the countdown of till when the next deadline is. And what we found is that students really began to form relationships through this blog and found it easier to reach out to people because this blog helped them get to know the residence life leaders, the first year dean, the orientation leaders. And again, going back to how students are communicating today, this is much more, it's natural for them. They're accustomed to building relationships online, mobile social methods, and it's really what they expect and feel comfortable with, certainly much more than picking up the phone. And so those are our top three. Again, there are other solutions, but we really wanted to be mindful of time. So if there are any questions, feel free to type those in, and we'll give you a minute or so to do that, and then go through some of those and share with you. All right, a great question about in terms of legal rules around texting. So for the most part, it's an opt-out method. So as long as the phone numbers were obtained in a kind of a good way, so you didn't buy a list and then send those text messages to prospects or leads. In terms of colleges using them with admitted students, for the most part, totally okay, as long as students are given the opportunity to opt out or reply with stop or cancel to stop receiving those messages. Having said that, there are a few states that have their own rules. I think Montana is one of them. I'm not sure what the others are, but I would check around with your individual states. But for the most part, just an opt-out method. All right, another question. You had mentioned companies that are helping with financial aid and making that process easier. If you could share what those companies are. One of those companies is Campus Logic. I don't know a whole lot about them, but they have really good reviews from what I've heard from colleagues and others in the industry. So I might start by checking out Campus Logic. And finally, one more question. Can you touch on some of those other solutions? We've only brought up our top three. And sure, some of those were live tweeting sessions. That was something we looked into. We actually did that at the college where I used to work as well. So for admitted students, just creating a hashtag, having different sessions for different purposes proved to be more effective. So potentially one chat session on financial aid, one chat session on student life, things like that. So that was one of the solutions that we didn't bring up, was live tweeting and also live chat. I noticed increasingly colleges had a live chat up on their websites. So again, and students not really inclined to communicate by phone, but live chat, like all of us, much more appealing way to communicate. So great question. We get this a lot. Students aren't engaging with us on Facebook. What should we do? So yes, Facebook still being used by students, but there's so much content coming in on Facebook. I read actually on Facebook's own website that at any given time that you log in, you can see up to 15,000 pieces of content, especially if you have more likes or more friends. So there's no way to guarantee, even if a student has liked or followed your page, that they're going to see that information. They might not necessarily see what you're putting out there. So we what are some other options of, and that's what we really do a lot of our work around, helping colleges communicate better. A lot of schools are using their own platforms to communicate information. Again, private, whether that's a private app for students to use or something like that, that's often proved a lot more promising. All right, and that's all the time we have. We're right at about half an hour, so up to half an hour. So again, we'll follow up with via email with some links to all these resources and a link to the presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you more and hear what you all are doing at your institution. All right, thanks so much.